Hey yeah guys, this is Dr. Raina Joshi and I would be taking a bit of discussion on vaccines and vaccination. So starting from what the vaccine is, it is basically a immunobiological substance designed to produce a specific protection against the given disease, whichever disease occurs. We are providing an advanced protection against it. So it is a kind of what we are prophylactically immuning ourselves. So it is an type of immunoprophylaxis, and this is obtained, this gives us an artificial acquired active type of an immunity. The term vaccine was coined by Louis Pasteur first. However, later the term vaccination was given by Edward Jenner, who developed the first vaccine of smallpox in year 1798. Right? So this was the first major breakthrough for the discovery of vaccine by Sir Edward Jenner. Later on, other vaccines were also discovered. So, if you have a brief history of vaccines, and it's difficult sometimes to remember each and every year. So, how you can remember is, right, a briefly kind of an remembering in which T's it occurs. That first vaccine that was invented by Sir Edward Jenner in 1798. That is of smallpox, right? The smallpox vaccine. So we can remember in 70s, right? 1700s. This was discovered, right? Then in 1800s. So in 1800s, which vaccines came? There were two major URC in 1800s. So rabies and cholera. Then in 1900s, so in 1900s there was much more discovery and invention of new and other kind of vaccines which occurred. So in 1920s, so in 1920s we had a major breakthrough, the most important vaccines, right? So remember this, in 1920s we had a basic vaccine group. That was BCG vaccine, that is Bacillus calmette-guerin, the full form, diphtheria, pertussis and tetanus vaccine. Right. In 1930s we had yellow fever and influenza vaccine. In 1949, a year before the India got republic, was the mumps vaccine was discovered. In 1950s, first the intravenous polio vaccine was discovered, and then oral polio vaccine was discovered, right? In 60s we had MR, 60s MR, right? So measles and rubella. Next was in 70s. Also meningococcal type C vaccine was also discovered in 60s only. Right, in 70s we had type A meningococcal vaccine, and another important breakthrough here was hepatitis B vaccine. Clear? How to remember roughly? By not remembering the exact year. Even if you are remembering this, you can have some highlight for remembering the years. Next we come up to the classification of vaccine, that is what are the types of vaccines, right? So broadly classifying, there are major 4 types we can say, right? Based on the type of preparation, that based on the type of conjugation, based on the type of immunization, and based on the type of route they are administered. Okay, so based on the type of preparation, that is how basically we are preparing the vaccine. So are we taking live organisms? Okay, so live organisms, they are attenuated. Live, what is mean by attenuation is, we are taking live microorganisms, but we are reducing their pathogenicity, that is their capacity of producing a disease. We are removing that pathogenicity part, but however, we are maintaining the antigenicity of that microorganism, so that the antigen would stimulate the further production of our immune cells, that is antibodies. Okay, then we are producing killed vaccines. We are killing the microorganisms, we are inactivating it, and we are producing it. Next is toxoids or toxins. Like whatever toxins that are produced by virus and bacteria, they are being taken and they are being converted into the form of toxoids, that is removing their pathogenicity and the capability of those toxins to create the disease, and they are being used to produce vaccines, right? The another type is using subunit, that is we are using a protein or a polysaccharide, a fragment or a subunit from the bacteria or viral antigens which are responsible for producing a specific type of an pathogenicity. So we are not using a whole organism or something, we are just taking that much fragment and which is responsible for providing us the immunity, and we are using that. And then fifth type is the combination type, we are combining two types of vaccine, that is either live plus, that is DPT for example, where we are combining diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus vaccines together and we are injecting them as one. Next is based upon conjugation. So the subunits are of two types, they are either polysaccharide or they are made up of protein. So the polysaccharide part of the subunit, they are unconjugated, right? But however, when this polysaccharide is conjugated, that is we are connecting it, joining it with the help of a protein carrier, then those vaccines become conjugated vaccines. Okay, then the next is based upon the type of immunization. So as we know that there are vaccines which are to be routinely immunized, like so from the birth there is a cycle which is to be given, and those are the mandatory vaccines which are being written by the national immunization schedule, which is provided by government, and they are for free, most of them, right? So they are the routinely immunized vaccines. And another type is the immunized for individuals. So every other vaccines which are costly, they are being spent and they are to be taken with by the people, or we need to buy them or we need to provide them. For example, if we are dentists, we are doctors, so we are repeated exposure to hepatitis B vaccine, so we must do the vaccination of that by ourselves, right? There are other vaccines like rabies vaccine, so we are providing it only when a person gets infected by a dog bite or something. Okay, then based upon the route of administration, it can be oral, which is provided by oral route, that is oral polio vaccine, and parenteral route, that can be either intradermal or intramuscular subcutaneous, and we can provide them by both. Some vaccines can be given by both the route. Now here vaccines which are being designed to give by subcutaneous route of it, they can be given IM, that is intramuscularly. However, the vaccines which are to be given intramuscularly, we can never give those vaccines by the subcutaneous or intradermal route because of their reaction and side effects. Okay, so this was all about the classification and types of vaccines. Coming up to the next, that how do vaccines work, right? So basically the main mechanism by which the vaccines work is by producing antibodies, that is the cell mediated immunity, right? However, there are the two types of antigens that are there, right? One is a T cell dependent antigen and another one is a T cell independent antigen. Okay, so those are the T cell dependent antigens. They are better, the vaccines are better which are T cell dependent, and they work either by antibody production, right, producing humoral cell mediated immunity, and and if not antibody production, then they work by cytotoxic CD8 T lymphocytes production, right? They are the specific antiviral cytokines. Okay. Now, when in T cell dependent antigens, so T cell dependent antigens are mostly the protein antigens, which are the pure proteins, that is the vaccines of hepatitis B, A, and toxoids, right? So this, what happens is they activate the antigen T cells, right? The antigen T cells trigger, they migrate to the germinal centers. The germinal centers are the one which are the centers from which the immune cells are being produced, and they produce the specific antibodies against the disease for providing the protection. However, this is a form of definitely the plasma cells. These plasma cells have a short half-life, right, and they die 4 to 8 weeks after vaccinations. However, the few plasma cells which are remaining from here, right, they exit the nodes and spleen and migrate to the bone marrow site, and they survive there in the supporting stromal cells, and they later on get converted into the memory B cells generated in response to the T dependent antigens, right? So this memory is then preserved when the reinfection occurs, and when the reinfection occurs, immediately these memory B cells would work and start producing antibodies against the antigen or the pathogenic organism. Clear? Now next is T cell independent mechanism or antigens. So which are the T cell? Polysaccharides. Polysaccharides antigens are the basically T cell independent antigens, right? So these are of Streptococcus pneumoniae, Neisseria meningitidis, Haemophilus influenza, Salmonella typhi, right? This all are the basically the main examples of polysaccharide antigens, and they act, they whenever from the injected site, they don't go to the germinal centers, right? They go to the marginal zones. This is the difference. They go to the marginal zones of spleens and nodes, lymph nodes, and they bind to the immunoglobulin receptor at that site, and they stimulate B cells and activate and produce the proliferation, which is further converted into plasma cells. Now here already they are produced from germinal centers, so they never get exit, and plasma cells die after 2 to 4 weeks in the response, and they have a low, and so the immunogenicity or the antibodies are short lived and die rapidly. Also, what happens that as the P antigens do not induce the germinal centers, the memory B cells are not elicited from here. So consequently, when we are re-exposure occurs, the vaccine is to be given same type, and in the same type there is hyper-responsiveness to the vaccine than the previous type. Okay, so in such cases we do not have to give booster doses, and if we give, there is only a single booster dose that is to be given for polysaccharide vaccines to acquire a lifelong protection. Clear about T cell independent and T cell dependent. Now coming after the step, after what happens, we injected the vaccine. So which is the first step following the injection? So it is different by live vaccine and the killed vaccine. So what do live vaccines basically do? The live vaccine antigens attract whole of the local and systemic innate cells or innate cells related to innate immunity, that are your dendritic cells, monocytes and neutrophils. Okay, and in response to that, further those activate the lymphatic vessels, the draining lymph nodes, and further take place the activation of T and B lymphocytes. So they are activating the generalized whole system to work against for producing the immunity. However, for the killed vaccines, what do? They go only to local or unilateral lymph node sites. that is very limited area, so their immunogenicity is really very low, and the preferred site for the vaccine is intramuscular, right? Now coming up to the polysaccharide vaccines, right? The polysaccharide vaccine, the polysaccharide antigen specifically is unable to evoke the immune response in children because they have immature marginal zones. They really develop around 18 months, that is around nearly 2 years of age. So polysaccharide vaccines are not to be given in children below 2 years. So what to do in such cases? In such cases, what we do, we conjugate the polysaccharide vaccines and we inject the conjugated form of the vaccines, because as we saw, which were the polysaccharide antigens, there was the streptococcus pneumoniae, Neisseria meningitidis, right? All this bacteria, they are most prone to cause infection in neonates and children less than 2 years. Okay, so it is important that we conjugate them and give the vaccines. So this was all about how the vaccines work. Now coming up to the general instructions, rules, contraindications and side effects produced by the vaccines. Okay, so whenever the term is given that vaccines that are to be given at birth, Cardiff and BCG vaccine. Okay, so vaccines that are given to be at birth should be given as early as possible after the birth, right? Or if this is not possible, then it should be given within 24 to 72 hours. If still not possible, then it should be given at least, not making delay later than 1 week after the birth, right? So whenever a question comes to you that when the BCG vaccine or the vaccines at the birth are to be administered, right, the very first option you should go is with as early or as soon as possible. Clear? Now when we are injecting two inactivated vaccines, right, the time interval between two doses of inactivated vaccine should be at least 4 weeks. Now regarding the administration of multiple vaccines, right, whenever we are administrating multiple vaccines together, so 2 live vaccines can be given together, live plus killed vaccines can be given together. However, in the case of cholera and yellow fever, we cannot give these 2 vaccines together because it may cause adverse reaction. Clear? Now coming up to the contraindication of vaccines. So logically speaking, eliminating, where we will inhibit or contraindicated live vaccines. What do live vaccines contain? Microorganisms. Yeah, then we have reduced the pathogenicity. However, they are live organisms. There are big chances that infection may occur as a response. Okay, so we would be pregnancy is the part where we don't want such infection to occur, as it may cause damage to fetus, right? We don't want any toxic reaction occurring due to live microorganisms. So we are contraindicating live vaccines in pregnancy. Secondly, in the cases of immunosuppression, right, even the corticosteroid therapy causes immunosuppression, right? A bit, it reduces inflammatory response and all. So in those cases, as only this immunity is suppressed, the counts are low, the WBC are low, in such cases effective antibody production would be not so good, right? So, and if this predominates the immune system of our body, there are chances the disease or the adverse response might occur in such cases. Also in symptomatic HIV, what happens in symptomatic HIV? The CD4 counts go low sometimes, right? So if there are less number of CD4 counts than normal, so in that case obviously the vaccine, the live bacteria or the live strains may predominant, and sometimes there are chances the disease might occur, right? Now all polysaccharides vaccines, as I said, are contraindicated less than 2 years. So basically, as I said, the S typhi, pneumococcal and meningococcal, there are polysaccharide antigens, so the polysaccharide vaccines, these three are contraindicated less than 2 years for the age which is more than 2 years, age greater than 2 years. Pertussis vaccines are contraindicated because they can produce some neurological complications. However, in adults, pertussis vaccines are not contraindicated in the cases where epilepsy is properly controlled by medication and in the cases of cerebral palsy, right? Now coming up to the side effects of vaccines, number 1 is shock, which is produced by diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus and pertussis vaccines. Then next is the Guillain-Barré syndrome. This syndrome is usually produced by bacteria, which is Campylobacter jejuni, and some of the viruses. Okay, so in this what happens, they have a multiple syndromic symptoms which are produced as a result of infection. That is, you have vomiting followed by diarrhea, followed by lower limbs inability to walk, coming up to from ascending way from down to upwards your system, and it attacks the central nervous system by producing antibodies, right? So this syndrome may be a side effect that is produced due to killed influenza. Next is the toxic shock syndrome, right? It is produced by MMR vaccine. And the hypersensitivity that is produced by hepatitis B, meningococcal and diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus vaccine. So this is all about the basic about the vaccine, that is classification, how they work and their contraindication and side effects. Here is the latest immunization timetable given by Indian Academy of Pediatrics in 2016. So as we see along the age side, the first death is given at birth, then we have at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks. The gap is of 4, that is 6 plus 4, 10, 10 plus 4, 14. Then the things come in months, that is having the gap of 3, right? That is 6 months, 9 months, 12 months and 15 months. Followed by a gap of 2, that is 16 to 18 months, 18 months, 2 years, 4 to 6 years and 10 to 12 years. Clear? So first 4, there is a gap of 4, then there is a gap of 3, then there is a gap of 2. So how you remember the schedule if you want? So remember the 3 main vaccines which are to be given at birth. Then see the first dose of vaccine which is being started and the last dose. So for example, hepatitis B vaccine was first started at the birth, right? Then it was given at 6 weeks and then later on it was given at, the third dose was at 6 months. So you remember at birth 6, that is 6 weeks and 6 months. Now DTWP1 vaccine was given, started at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, 3 times. Okay, 3 doses. Then the IPV vaccine similarly started in 6, 10, 10. So remember the first one, first dose, and then go along according to the gap. You can remember it well. Clear? This is about the injection site, where is to be given and at what age and which persons. Okay, that is preterm and neonates you give at the middle third or lower third junction of anterolateral thigh. In infants also, in toddlers and elders you give it an deltoid region or anterolateral thigh. In adolescents and adults at deltoid. In infants at thigh. In children greater than 12 years for the subcutaneous route you give it an outer triceps. and all intradermal injections are given in left deltoid. So, okay. Now coming up to the storage of vaccine. So where do we store vaccines? It is in a cold chain, right? So here usually the routine temperature for the storage of vaccine is plus 2 degree to plus 8 degree Celsius. For if you want to store for the longer period of time, then the temperature should be minus 20 degree to minus 40 degree Celsius. Clear? And similarly here, as the picture is shown, the most important component of cold chain in India is ILR, right? What is this ILR? It is ice-lined refrigerator, right? In which vaccines can be maintained at plus 2 degree to plus 8 degree Celsius. Here the temperature monitoring is done with the help of a dial thermometer, and we must check the temperature twice daily, and it is the medium of storage for all kinds of vaccines. Clear? Now how in cold chain there is a vaccine vial monitor, that is VVM, that is a marker of potency of vaccine, whether it can be used or not, right? So in this case how it works is the VVM has a heat sensitive material placed within the vial vaccine, which registers the cumulative heat exposure over the time, right? So in that, what does the mark consist of? It consists of an outer circle and it consists of an inner square, right? So based upon the degree, they are then stained with a blue color. Okay. So next, what happens is if by WHO grading, if the color changes is only in inner square. So if the color change in inner square is white, then it is grade 1. It is light blue, that is grade 2. Then in these two cases, grade 1, grade 2, where color is white and blue, light blue respectively, the vaccines can be used, right? If it is blue, after the conversion, the square is also blue. And then if the square is purple or black, then it is termed as grade 3 and grade 4 respectively, in which case the vaccines cannot be used and it should be discarded. So grade 3 is the mark point where the vaccine should be discarded. This is given with the example of an oral polio vaccine. Mostly the oral polio vaccines are monitored with the help of vaccine vial monitor. Clear? That is all about the basics of vaccines, and thank you for watching this video with patience. Hope that covers your all doubts regarding the vaccines and make you clear with the basic of vaccines. Thank you.